what are some of the opportunities here? Well, besides doing things and building things that relate to the tools that you yourselves use, you can actually still make things that are just as, say, technological, and as you'll see over the semester, with relatively little complexity. The marginal return of spending just a few weeks and months in a course like this is that you learn how to build things that you take for granted as using these days, and you take for granted as being accessible to you in your pockets, but it's remarkable, as those images suggest, just how much your predecessors accomplished over the course of just 3 months. One of the tools we built out as a course for students to use before the Harvard Courses tool was this one, a much simpler tool that simply took what traditionally was in PDF and paper form alone, the Harvard shuttle schedule, and allows you to look up things like, well, I'm in Mem Hall, I'd like to go to the quad, so I might click there and click here, and now you can see the next shuttles when they depart. Now, this is becoming underwhelming these days, but indeed, this was a huge improvement when the alternative was just paper. But you can do cool things too, and as we look ahead in this course to the final project, know that you'll be able to make things like this. If you don't mind, just have to make a quick call. I've got my thing plugged into the overhead here.
This is CS50 for Shuttle Boy. Press 1 to start over. Press 9.
So I've pressed 1.
What is your origin for quad? Press 1. Nether. Press 2. Boylston. Press 3. Lamont. Press 4. Manhall. Press 5.
So I'll hit
to
5.
Start over. Press 0. What is your destination for quad? Press
Let's
1.
go to the quad.
Nether. Press 2 to start. The next shuttle leaves in 7 minutes at 2 p.m. and then at 2:10 p.m., 2:20 p.m., and 2:30 p.m.
So there's your exit strategy if you're getting bored already. Well, that number was 617-BUG-CS50. And what's exciting about this is not so much that, because frankly, you can use SMS, you can use a plastic piece of card to look up numbers more quickly than the phone might recite. But that service alone that CS50 uses for that, called CS50 Voice, is a tool you yourselves can use at semester's end if you would like to build tools that actually make outbound calls or receive inbound calls and respond to some input. And that's all possible thanks to this notion of what's generally called an API, Application Programming Interface. And these have been entering now even the public lexicon. To use an API generally means to use data or to use functionality that someone else has implemented so that you yourself can stand on their shoulders and integrate really helpful, really cool, really useful functionality into your own program without reinventing that wheel yourself. You can liken it to the act of building a house. You could go out and chop down trees. You could go out and melt glass and make windows. But what do you do instead? You go to a store. You go to Home Depot. You buy planks of wood. You buy sheets of glass. And you integrate those prefabricated components into your own work so that your contribution to the whole process is the final output. And you care less about the underlying details of implementation. Believe it or not, thank you both. Believe it or not, I started out life as a... Thank you. So for what it's worth, testament to just how fun this particular world can be. I started out life here as an undergraduate in 1995 and was heads down into the government department, thinking I'd come in having liked things like history and con law in high school and such. And so I didn't really think about exploring a bit beyond my own comfort zone. And indeed, CS50 then, and to some extent still now, as well as computer science more generally, has this sort of daunting reputation that it's not so much for the uninitiated, but rather for those who've been doing it since the beginning of their life. But that's indeed not the case. That 77% statistic has been quite consistent. And so it wasn't myself until sophomore year that I finally got up the nerve to actually take the course, but I took it pass-fail. I enrolled because I thought I'm on this track toward government, but I'm going to finally get up the nerve to actually dabble in this course. And long story short, just the end of that semester did I declare my concentration as CS, that I end up, my God, doing this here today for the same course I once took. But that's not not, to be clear, the goal in this course. Most of the students, about just over half of the students that take 50, it is for them a terminal course, and that they don't go on to take other courses in computer science. But they parlay those skills and the savvy they derive in a course like this back into the social sciences, the humanities, the physical sciences, where they have large data sets or large volumes of information that they need to analyze or process, or even in the more familiar world of running student groups. And you want to be able to send out a mass mailing to 1,000 people. My God, doing it manually isn't so fun. So using a tool like Microsoft Word and Excel, so you can do better than that if you do it yourself and you have the savvy with which to do so. And that's ultimately, too, some of the takeaways of a course like this. So hello here to CS50 as to what to expect. So in terms of expectations, they're fairly straightforward. Attending lectures and sections, submitting 9 problem sets, taking 2 quizzes, and a final project, the images of which are conveyed by the fair and hackathon alike. In terms of grades, this is one that's particularly close to my heart. I am not a fan, in general, of grades. I think they tend to do more harm than good. There is value in that. They certainly help motivate, but that, of course, can be to a crippling degree. And so we've tried in recent years to send the message quite ardently to do what I myself did, to put that toe in the water and to explore what, for many of you, are indeed unfamiliar waters by taking it, if you so choose, pass-fail. You can be before long. But what is the course ultimately about? It's mostly about the hands-on aspects. In lectures, we present concepts and ideas and try as best I can to get you excited and genuinely interested in some subject. But undoubtedly, the work and the experience in this course derives from your working on the problem sets. But know that, so that they appeal to both those less comfortable and more comfortable alike, most of the problem sets we issue in 2 different editions, so to speak. A standard edition that's targeted at 90% of the students in the course, and then typically a hacker edition, which ultimately covers the same sorts of material, but from a more sophisticated, a more challenging perspective, asks you to do a bit more in terms of sophistication, because those hacker editions assume more. So realize, too, that though I might focus verbally on this 77%, there is a non-trivial number of 12% of the class that indeed have been programming since they were, say, 6 years old, or just took one course in AP Computer Science, or didn't even do that, but just kind of feel that they're ready for something new. So realize that there are these disparate tracks within the course that appeal ideally to both. Moreover, does the course provide some number of late days that you can spend during the semester? Inevitably, life happens, and you need to, for instance, we like to introduce every year as many new and exciting things as possible. And so for the first time this year, will we be transitioning away from what historically was a very server-side centralized architecture, where all CS50 students would run a program on their Mac or PC. It doesn't matter what OS you use. You would connect to some central server where software would await you there. Well, more fun these days, now that most everyone has particularly modern computers, is the ability for these computers, believe it or not, to run not just Mac OS or Windows as you currently are, but to run yet another operating system inside of a window on your own computer. And not this old school approach of like having to reboot your computer and then it changes operating systems. Double click an icon and voila, you're running an operating system called Linux, which is what will happen to use. But it will look, this CS50 appliance in a window, like just some other desktop. You'll have a little CS50 menu instead of a start menu in the bottom left-hand corner. You'll be able to navigate through the very user-friendly type tools that will introduce you to, all of which can be found in the real world. So nothing here is just simulated for the purposes of academics in the course. You'll be equipped throughout the semester with real-world sort of de facto standard tools that you'll use in your own fields, whether computer science, humanities, natural sciences, anytime you need a computer to solve some problem. We'll also, for those more familiar, perhaps for those more comfortable, introduce you to things like terminal windows and SSH, and we'll introduce you also to graphical editors with which to write code. And the odds are this looks completely cryptic right now. And indeed, if you're among that 77%, you might not have ever seen a program's source code, the thing that the human writes to make the computer do something. This is one of the simplest programs a human might write to just make the computer do something stupid, like say hello world on the screen. But this year, too, for the first time, will we also introduce, for those familiar, what's called an IDE, an integrated development environment, so that if at term's end you actually do want to be among those who goes off and interns at Microsoft or Google or Facebook or in Wall Street to actually use some coding skills, to apply them to some real-world problems, know that this term, more so than ever, you will be very well equipped with what's out there.